Hey guys, good evening. I hope all of you are having a very wonderful evening. So, I'm back with my NCRT series. We are covering class 6th NCRT science textbook. As I told you, as I promised you, I will be bringing a lot of uh, you know courses related to NCRT science and technology textbook, and we have started with class 6. I will be taking it all the way up to class 10, and also I'll be selectively doing some of the class 12 NCRTs of biology, physics, and chemistry over the period of time. So if you have watched my previous video, you would be aware that we have already started our discussion on class 6 NCRT. The course is being presented by me, Siva Prasad. Right? I'll just do a quick review of whatever we did in the previous class, and then I will be proceeding with today's topics. All right. So yesterday we started from a very scratch. Right? We talked about herbivorous, carnivorous, omnivorous. Then following that, we talked about a concept called as food, and I told you that food has essential components that are called as nutrients. We discussed about major nutrients that you find in our food like carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals, etc. I told you how food also contains dietary fibers. We talked about different nutrients and what their particular role is in our body. Right? We talked about carbohydrates and fats, how they provide energy. We talked about vitamin A, how they are healthy for eyes, skin, etc. We talk about vitamin C, how it is very useful for your immune system for fighting against diseases. I talked about vitamin D, which is useful for utilizing calcium for bones and teeth. Then we talked about proteins, how it is useful for bodybuilding, right? Following that, I told you about roughages, dietary fibers that are present in pulses, potatoes, vegetables, fruits, and all. Then following that, we talked about the importance of water. Then I told you about balanced diet. Why is it important for having all the necessary nutrients in required quantities? And I told you what happens when you have excess of these nutrients. Similarly, when you have too less of these nutrients, you end up having something called as deficiency diseases. I discussed about various deficiency diseases, what vitamin or mineral should you be deficient in to be developing these deficiencies. For example, I told you about loss of vision, night blindness, etc. I told you that this is caused by deficiency in vitamin A. Then we talk about beriberi, which is a result of vitamin B deficiency. Vitamin C deficiency leads to scurvy. Vitamin D deficiency leads to rickets. Calcium deficiency leads to bone and tooth decay. Iodine leads to goiter. Iron results in anemia. Right? These are things we have already discussed. I am going in a fast forward manner so that you are able to recall whatever we discussed in previous class. Then we got to know about plants. We talked about herbs. We talked about shrubs. We talked about trees. I distinguished between all of them. Then we got to know plants better. We talked about creepers, we talked about climbers. Then I told you about different parts of the plant. I told you about stem, the utility of the stem. Then I told you about leaf, about concepts like petiole, about lamina. I hope you remember all of this. Then we talked about these are called as veins, and this is called as midrib of a leaf. Then I told you about a concept called as leaf venation, which is basically the design made by the veins in a leaf. It's called as leaf venation, right? It could be reticulate, for example, this is called as reticulate. I told you there could be parallel venation, for example, like this. All right. Then following this, I told you about the concept called as photosynthesis, how the plants, they are able to fix carbon dioxide, fix sunlight, and are able to produce their own food, and how they are able to satisfy their energy requirements. I told you how food prepared by the leaves, it is stored in the plants also. I told you about the iodine test in the previous class. Then I told you about a concept called as transpiration, the importance of transpiration, how it occurs, and what is the importance, what are the various reasons the plant loses water through their leaves, right? I told you about the suction pull, etc. in previous class. Then yesterday we ended up talking about the roots also. Then following that, I told you about different types of root. One is called as the lateral roots, tap roots. Then other one is called as fibrous roots. Following that, we ended up discussing about the reproductive part of a plant, that is the flower, right? I told you about the prominent parts that are present in a flower. I told you about these petals. I told you about sepals. Then following that, I told you about different parts of the flower. I told you about stamen, which happens to be the male part of the flower. We talked about anther, filament. Then I told you about pistil, which happens to be the female part of a flower. Alright, so this is where we left off in the previous class. Now I am going to continue this discussion. I am going to take it forward. We are going to talk about habitat. Alright, nowadays this term is pretty much in the news. You might have heard something called as habitat destruction, right, with respect to tigers or many other natural animals living in different parts of the country. There's this concept called as habitat destruction, right? This is because of deforestation, because of urbanization, urban population expanding, right? This loss of habitat is also resulting in something called as man-animal conflict, man-wild conflict, right? So let us try to understand what exactly this word habitat means. The surroundings where plants and animals they live is called as habitat. Habitat is basically the usual place of residence of the plants and animals. Alright. In environment and ecology, we talk about another word that is called as range. Right? You have to understand how this is very different. Habitat is the surroundings where the plants and animals are usually found, where they are usually residing. Right? For example, if I am residing in Delhi, that happens to be my habitat. But sometimes imagine I'm going to Varanasi, I'm going to Manali, I'm going to Mussoorie, right? So this happens to be my range, right? So range is larger, habitat is something that is smaller, alright? Several kinds of plants and animals, they may share the same habitat, right? In the same habitat, it's not just like I am living alone, maybe I'm living with dogs, I'm living with cats. Similarly, if you go to a forest, deers are living over there, tigers might be living there, foxes are living, rabbits are living, etc. That's what a habitat could be shared by multiple plants and animals. Alright. There are different types of habitat. As you can see, you can have terrestrial habitat or you can have aquatic habitat. Okay. Terrestrial habitat means it's a habitat that exists on land. For example, if you go to grasslands, if you go to mountain tops, if you go to plains, the northern plains, if you go to Deccan plateaus, these are all examples of terrestrial habitat. Alright, see these camels, they are living in this desert region. This desert is an example of terrestrial habitat, right? If you talk about lakes, if you talk about oceans, if you talk about seas, these are called as aquatic habitats, alright? This is an aquarium, as you can see. An aquarium is an example of man-made, not natural, man-made aquatic habitat, alright? So aquarium, as you can see, multiple species are living over here. Alright, so even if you look in a lake, inside a lake, so you have algae living over there, you have phytoplankton, zooplankton, you might have fishes, you might have frogs, so many different animals are living in the same habitat. Okay, a habitat can be shared. Alright, this brings us to a discussion called as adaptation, and I'm going to introduce a very important concept to you. It is called as acclimatization. These are technical words that I'm introducing to you. Remember, in your prelims examination, UPSC will be using these technical terminologies and they will not be explaining what these terms mean. For example, they directly asked you vertical forming, fertigation, etc. Right? You are already expected to know what these terminologies mean. Alright? So let us start with adaptation. The presence of specific features and habits which enable a plant or an animal to live in a particular habitat is called as adaptation. Okay? Questions related to adaptation have been asked in the previous examinations also. Alright? Adaptation means I would like to live in a specific habitat. For example, I am an animal, I would like to live in a desert region. I know very well that in desert region, I don't have ample supply of water. There is too much amount of heat. So therefore, my body needs to make certain adaptations, right? So that I can survive in that particular habitat. I will be giving you an example of adaptation in a few more minutes. Alright? So this is long term. This is something more permanent in nature. This is called as adaptation. On the other hand, sometimes small changes take place in our body over shorter periods of time. This is to overcome a small problem due to changes in the surrounding. This is called as acclimatization. Okay? So what is this? Adaptation is something. This is a long-term change. This is something that occurs over long periods. Okay? This is to overcome large problems. For example, I have to live forever in a desert. So I need to be adapted to that. But on the other hand, let's say for a temporary period of time, I would like to climb the Mount Everest. I'm not going to be spending time over there for more than 2 days or 3 days. It is only for a short period of time that I am climbing Mount Everest, assuming, or any other mountain top, right? So to overcome small challenges, I undergo certain changes for a short period of time. This concept is called as acclimatization. For example, when I'm at high mountain tops, I know that the air is thin, right? The pressure is decreased, the air is very thin. So that means whenever I'm breathing, I'm not giving my body enough supply of oxygen. So I tend to breathe faster so that I can take in more amount of oxygen in a single breath. Alright, so this is the concept called as acclimatization. So acclimatization, as you can see, this is temporary or this is for a short period of time, while adaptation is something that is long term. Alright, just like I gave you an example of acclimatization, I will give you an example of adaptation. Alright, I'll give you 2 to 3 examples so that I can drive home this particular concept. Right. Deserts, for example, desert plants, they lose very little water through transpiration. Right. Remember, what is transpiration? Transpiration is how water is lost through the leaves. Right. This I told you for cooling down the plant, for creating a suction pool, etc. But now let's talk about deserts. Desert may already there is a dearth of water. So if plants also start to lose water through transpiration, that is very bad for the plant, right? It will not be able to get that water back. Remember, because deserts, there's a dearth of water. That means there is less water available. Desert plants lose very little water through transpiration. How do they manage this? The leaves in desert plant are either absent, or they are very small, or they are present in the shape of spines. Remember, if you have broad leaves, it is easy for you to lose water through transpiration. So that is the reason in desert plants, if you look at cactus, etc., there are no leaves that are present. Okay? So that means there is no possibility of transpiration, or very very small leaves are present. If the leaves are very very small, that means you will lose less water through transpiration. Alright, that's what. Or similarly, these leaves, they are converted into spines. This kind of question was asked in the prelims examination recently. Stem is also covered with thick waxy layer. Right? Why is the stem covered with thick waxy layer? This also helps it to retain water. Right? Stem also wants to retain as much water as possible. It doesn't want to shed water. It doesn't want to lose water. So that is why. Alright, it is covered with a thick waxy layer. Roots also, remember, they go very deep into the soil for absorbing water. Right? The roots, they have to go in greater depths. Remember, we are talking about the deserts. So water is not easily available. Water, even if it's available, it is available at very very great depths. So you should have enough long roots that can penetrate all the way and sort of gather water from there. So that's the reason you see, if you look at desert plants, the roots go very very deep. Right? And remember, the photosynthesis in these plants is usually carried out by the stems. Remember, what did I tell you? I told you most of the times, to save water being lost through transpiration, leaves are either absent, or they are very very small, or leaves are present in the form of spines. So that means, where do photosynthesis occur? In a normal plant, photosynthesis occurs in the leaf. But here we are saying that there is no leaf, leaves are absent, or leaves are present in the form of these spines, as you can see over here. So where do photosynthesis occur? Photosynthesis is carried out by the stems themselves. Alright, so as you can see, various changes have been made in these desert plants to ensure that they survive in extreme temperatures, they survive and they reduce their loss of water. Right, so this is an example of adaptation. Okay, this is not a temporary transformation we are talking about. This is far more permanent in nature. The objective is far more long term as far as the desert plants are concerned. Alright, this is an example of adaptation. I will give you one more example so that you are able to easily understand this concept and are able to recall. Right? Let us talk about mountainous regions. These habitats are normally very cold and very windy. Right? Trees, if you see, are normally cone shaped. You can see over here, the trees are cone shaped like this. Look at the trees, they are all cone shaped and they have sloping branches. What is the reason? The leaves are also very needle like. What is the reason behind it? This helps the rainwater and snow to slide off easily. So if there is rainwater, if there is snow, etc., they will slide off easily. Right? So that's the reason. So that means you are able to get sunlight, right? If you have snow that is present on the leaves all the time, so photosynthesis might not be possible. So that is the reason you would like all the snow to easily slide off. So that is the reason the trees, the leaves are needle-like and also they are cone-shaped and they have these sloping branches. Okay, and if you look at animals, look at this. I got an example of this white tiger. Okay, this is snow leopard. I'm sorry. Okay, it's a snow leopard if I'm not mistaken. So animals, they have a very thick skin or they have a fur. Look at this fur. This is to protect them from the cold. Remember, whenever you are going into extreme climates, extreme cold weather regions, what do? You put on a lot of fur, you put on a lot of woolen clothes, you put on a lot of jackets, etc. That's the same thing over here. The fur is to protect the animal from extreme cold, alright, or they have a very very thick skin, alright. You might have heard in Delhi also, you might have seen there's this certain breed of dog, it is called as husky, right? You have seen this, it's called as a Siberian husky. It is meant for extremely cold weather temperatures, but then people are torturing such animals by bringing them into places like Delhi where you are having 30, 40 degree, 45 degrees centigrade temperature, etc. These huskies are meant for minus 20 degrees and all. They can, easily live in such regions. Okay, they have a very thick fur in them, right? So that's what. They are adapted to live in extremely cold conditions, not in places like Delhi. So anyway, okay, these are examples. Right? If you look at oceans, I'll give you another example of adaptation. Animals have gills. This is to help them use oxygen that is dissolved in water. We are living in terrestrial ecosystem. So we are able to take oxygen, all our oxygen requirements. We are able to take oxygen directly from the air itself, from the atmosphere itself. But what about poor animals that are living in water, for example, like fishes, crabs, etc. The fishes, they have something called as gills. What is special about these gills? These gills allow them to use oxygen. Use oxygen that is dissolved in water. So they are able to utilize the oxygen that is dissolved in water. Okay, so this is the function of gills. All right. The sea animals, for example, like dolphins, whales, they do not have gills. They in fact breathe in through nostrils, or these are called as blowholes. These are usually located on the upper part of the head. Okay, if you look at whales or dolphins, etc. Okay, I know this is a very bad picture, but यहाँ पे they will have something called as blowhole. Okay, using this they are able to take in the oxygen. Okay, they surface up for a brief period of time, they take in the oxygen, then they go down. Alright, so this is how dolphins and whales they breathe. So as you can see, these are different ways in which animals and plants they have adapted themselves so that they are able to survive in a specific ecosystem. Okay, so this is more long term, this is more permanent, this is called as adaptation. Right? It is not like the gills will vanish off after a brief period of time. ऐसा नहीं होता है. But on the other hand, if you talk about acclimatization, I tend to breathe faster only when I am in a mountain top. But suddenly I have come back to the plains, I have come back to New Delhi. What happens? I don't need to breathe faster anymore. Right? So therefore, it was only a temporary transition, temporary change that I faced, I underwent. Okay? That temporary change is called as acclimatization. Alright? Okay. Now, since we are talking about living organisms, about adaptation, etc., how do you know that a certain organism is alive? What are the various processes that living organisms undergo? Remember, living organisms, they need food for their energy. For example, we are consuming plants and animals for energy. The plants are able to carry out photosynthesis so that they are able to satisfy their energy requirements. They show growth. For example, I have not always been like this. Over the period of time, I have grown taller, stronger, sharper. Okay? So even the plant, if you have a small plant, it has grown into a tree over the period of time. We are respiring, that means I'm taking in oxygen, giving out carbon dioxide, that is respiration. I'm responding to external stimuli. If somebody comes and pokes me, I will probably get angry, I will probably respond to that, beat them back or something like that. So I'm responding to external stimuli. Suddenly, let's say, the room light became very bright, so I would like to cover my eyes, right? Then we undergo excretion, that means whatever I'm consuming, not everything can be utilized by my body. Some things are unwanted toxic material that is not required, that has to be thrown out of my body. That is the process of excretion. Even animals, plants, they do excretion. Then finally, remember reproduction, right? This is the ultimate objective of life, is to give birth to the next generation. Okay, be it plants, be it animals, you see that they reproduce. This is an important process of living organism. All right, so all important processes of living organisms have been summarized in this slide. Okay, let me close this chapter and move ahead, and let me talk about something called as hydrological cycle. Okay, it's also called as hydrological cycle or water cycle. Okay, it's very simple to understand. So as you can see, you have water that is present over here in lakes, etc. You have water that is present in this sea. Okay, you have water that is present in this groundwater. So as you can see, from the groundwater, some of them flow into the oceans, some of them flow into the seas, etc. Okay, so from here, because of sunlight, the process of evaporation takes place. Evaporation means water from the liquid form, it is getting converted into the vapor form, right? So that's what this is, evaporation. So warm air rises. Why does warm air rise? I will tell you in the next class when we discuss about class 7 NCERT, right? So water vapor, it is rising above, right? Similarly, you see water is being lost as water vapor through this process called as transpiration. From here also, glaciers are melting and they are getting converted to water and ultimately into water vapor. So these are various ways in which water vapor is getting released into the atmosphere. So as this water vapor tends to rise, as you are moving away from the surface, you know that the temperature starts to decrease. So as the temperature starts to decrease, over the period of time, this water vapor, they undergo a process that is called as condensation. Okay, condensation means water vapor is getting converted into water droplets. Okay, it is getting converted into liquid water. This results in formation of the clouds, and ultimately, when the clouds are too heavy, I'll tell you what all these terms mean. There is precipitation. Precipitation means rainfall, right? So the water vapor that has gone up, it is coming back to the earth again in the form of water. They will come back to these oceans. They will come back to these lakes, etc. Some of them will go back into the groundwater, Okay, so this is a cycle, it keeps on happening. Alright, this is called as the hydrological cycle. So in the future, when we take up the class 12 NCERT biology, I will be talking about biogeochemical cycles. Okay, there one of the cycles I will be discussing is water cycle. Along with that, I will be talking about nitrogen cycle, phosphorus cycle, then carbon dioxide cycle, etc. Alright. Okay, let's quickly talk about how clouds are formed. Right? When water vapor moves up, as I told you, hot air rises. So water vapor, after water is getting converted into water vapor through the process of evaporation, water vapor tends to move up. It becomes cooler and cooler. As it reaches sufficient heights, the air becomes so cool that the water vapor present in it condenses to form tiny drops of water that are called as water droplets. What did I tell you? So your water droplets, they keep on rising up, rising up, rising up. As I told you, as you keep on rising up, you need to understand that the temperature starts to go down as you keep on rising up. Alright? So when you achieve sufficient height, the air becomes so cool that this water vapor, it can no longer remain in its vapor form, in its gaseous form. It condenses, that means it transforms itself into liquid water, it transforms itself into tiny drops of water. Okay? These are called as water droplets. Fine. If these tiny droplets, they remain floating in the air, they appear to us as clouds. Right? What exactly are these clouds? These are nothing but these tiny drops of water that are floating around. Okay? This is what clouds are. So when the clouds become too heavy, what happens? You have precipitation, that is rainfall. Alright? So from here onwards, since we have entered into the concept of water, let's try to move forward and understand the concept called as groundwater. Right? A part of the rainwater, remember, gets absorbed by the ground and it seems to disappear in the soil. Remember, when there is precipitation, some of them are falling on this lake, sea, ocean, etc. Some of them are falling into this river. Some of them fall over here, they get converted into glacier, ice caps, etc. Some of them, what happens is they are falling on the ground. And after they fall on the ground, they sort of seem to disappear. They have gone somewhere. Where exactly have they gone? They have seeped inside the ground. They have seeped into the ground. Alright? They seem to have disappeared inside the soil. Some of this water, remember, it is brought back to the air by the process of evaporation and transpiration. How does this occur? So as you can see from the groundwater, some of the groundwater tends to flow into the lakes, tends to flow into the ocean, tends to flow into the sea. From there again, this water will get evaporated. Again, there will be precipitation, right? Similarly, some of the groundwater will be uptaken by the roots of a plant, right? They will uptake water from the roots of the plant, thanks to the roots of the plant. Okay, so this groundwater is taken up by this. Then this plant, as you know, it undergoes something called as transpiration, which means this water, liquid water, is getting converted into water vapor. So again, you see, it is lost back into the atmosphere. Again, it will come down as rain. So as you can see, this cycle is complete. Alright. Groundwater, remember, it is the source for many lakes as well. Water that is drawn using tube wells and hand pumps, these are nothing but groundwater. Okay? Hand pumps, you might have seen hand pumps, no? You might have pumped it. Nowadays, you don't get to see hand pumps a lot, but in villages and all, you can still see a lot of hand pumps, right? So that, and using tube wells, whatever you draw out, water that you get, that is nothing but groundwater. Alright? Okay. This brings us to a discussion on floods. What exactly are floods? When you have excessive rainfall or excessive water present, this will result in inundation of the land. The land gets inundated by water. Okay, as you can see over here, the entire land is consumed by water. This is called as flood. Alright. This brings us to a discussion on droughts. We understood what is flood, then the exact opposite, we have to discuss about droughts. Right? There are three different types of drought. You need to remember them. This is not given in NCERT. One is called as meteorological droughts. Okay. This drought is declared when there is lack of rainfall. Okay. For example, when the monsoons fail in India, the kind of drought that we have is called as meteorological drought. Okay, there are certain criteria. I'm not getting into the technical details. How much amount of minimum rainfall should be there, below which you can classify it as drought, etc. That much I'm not getting into. Meteorological drought means this is a drought that is declared because of lack of rainfall. There is no rainfall, or there is very little scanty rainfall. Okay? Then meteorological drought is declared. Similarly, hydrological drought. This is declared, remember, when your groundwater, etc. has gone below certain levels. Okay? This results in something called as hydrological drought. This drought is declared when groundwater that we were talking about recently, so that has gone below a certain level. Then we declare something called as hydrological droughts. Then we have something called as agricultural drought. This is declared when the moisture content in the soil that is too little and it is unable to support agricultural crops. That is called as agricultural drought. Okay, these are three different kinds of droughts. Please try to remember their names. Alright. Okay. So as you know, whenever rainfall takes place, so we need to try to harvest rainwater. What are the various methods of harvesting rainwater, etc. I will be talking about this in a few more minutes. Alright. Okay. let's take up one of the important topics that we are going to discuss as a part of Class 6 NCERT. This is about disposal of waste. Okay, nowadays you might have heard solid waste management in urban areas. It is a very huge problem. If you go to city like Delhi, etc., you will see how difficult it is to manage solid waste. Okay, there's this mismanagement of landfills. What exactly are landfills? I will tell you in a few more minutes. Then nowadays, because we are using so many kind of electronic items, like we have so many gadgets like smartphones and tablets and laptops, etc. These are all resulting in generation of something called as e-waste. They have toxic metals like mercury, cadmium, etc. are being used. How do we dispose e-waste? This is a huge problem. Then, as you know, our Prime Minister had launched something called as the Swachh Bharat mission, the Clean India mission, right? So this all has brought to fore the importance of disposal of waste. This is a big thing that we are discussing in nowadays time. All right. So let's talk about various treatments, facilities available for disposal of waste. All right. First is open dumps. What exactly are open dumps? These are uncovered areas used to dump solid waste. That means you go to a place that is outside the city. Okay. Over there you go and you dump solid waste. That is called as open dumps. All right. There is no proper way, scientific way of disposing this waste. You just dump it in an open ground. All right. That is open dumps. Then we have something called as landfills. I'm sorry, there is an N that is missing. Landfills. A pit is dug in the ground. All right. And soil is added over layers of garbage, and then it is sealed. What exactly am I trying to say? Right. What you do for landfills is you dig a pit like this. This is ground. So you dug a pit like this. Alright, and then what are you doing? You are putting garbage over here. You are putting garbage, and then you are adding soil and you are sealing it off. You are not sealing it off, you are just adding soil of layers over the garbage. This is called as landfills. Okay, this is a normal landfill. There is something called as a sanitary landfill, which is supposed to be more hygienic. Alright, so what's the difference between a landfill and a sanitary landfill? So if you see in a sanitary landfill, borders are lined with materials that are impermeable. That means this border that you get to see over here, this is sealed. Okay, this is sealed like this with an impermeable material. That means this garbage cannot seep into the groundwater or something. Okay, this garbage stays safe over here. If you don't go for sanitary landfills, what happens is landfills there are some chemicals, toxics, etc. This can leak. This can seep through the soil, and there could be some groundwater over here. The groundwater might get contaminated. But when you go for sanitary landfills, what are you doing? You're using a material that is impermeable. That means whatever waste is over here, whatever toxic chemicals are there, they will not be able to seep through the soil. Alright? This is one way of disposing of waste. This is called a sanitary landfill. Then we can have incineration plant. That means what do? You burn waste at a very, very high temperature. This process is called as incineration. This is another way of destroying waste, but the problem is, remember, when we burn certain kinds of waste, they end up releasing some amount of toxic waste into the atmosphere. Okay, this is another problem. Then another way of treatment and disposal of waste is pyrolysis. This is a process of combustion on the absence or limited supply of oxygen. Okay, what happens? What's the difference between pyrolysis and incineration? Incineration I am not restricting the supply of oxygen, but in pyrolysis I am either restricting, I am using reduced amount of oxygen, or I am doing this burning in the absence of oxygen. This is pyrolysis. Alright, the advantage is that certain gases are not produced when you don't use oxygen. Right? So you have control over the byproducts of pyrolysis. Then you have another process for treatment is called as composting. What happens is microorganisms like fungi, bacteria, etc. they are used to decompose degradable organic waste into humus in the presence of oxygen. So what do? I put waste over here. On this waste, I add some microorganisms like fungi, bacteria, etc. So they will naturally decompose this organic waste. They will convert it in something useful. Okay? They will convert it into something called as humus. Okay? This is useful for the soil. This humus is a reservoir of nutrients. Alright. Then we can have one more concept. It is called as vermicomposting. This is called as earthworm farm. Right. So earthworms are also very good way to dispose waste, because remember, these earthworms and all, they eat these waste and then they digest it and then they excrete it. So this excreted out product that is given out by earthworms, they are also very good manure for the soil. Alright. So they are very useful for the plants, etc. Alright. Okay. Since we are talking about single-use plastic, etc., let's quickly talk about the evils of plastic bag. It is given you in NCERT. They can choke drains and the sewer system, right? The degradation process of plastic bags is very, very slow. They don't get degraded so easily, and it is very time consuming. And above all, remember, we cannot go for incineration and all. Why? Because burning of plastic bags is very, very harmful. A lot of toxic gases are released in the atmosphere if you go for burning of plastic, right? And above all, you see animals, they consume plastic bags. So many number of times I've seen cows trying to eat plastic bags, etc. They end up dying because of choking, right? These are the evils of plastic bags. So what are the various ways at a personal level, how can we deal with garbage? Okay, this is given in class 6 NCERT, so that's why I'm discussing this. So dealing with garbage, making minimal use of plastic bags. Try to minimize use of plastic bags. Try to reuse them whenever, wherever possible. So just don't throw them away after a single use. Try to keep them for a longer duration of time. Why don't we just shift to paper bags? They are easily biodegradable. We can go for jute bags. These are another ways. We will try avoid throwing these plastic bags randomly. We should never burn plastic bags. As I told you, it releases a lot of toxic gases. Vermicomposting at home. This can be used to deal with kitchen waste, right? I just told you what is vermicomposting over here. That is earthworm farming, right? Then we can recycle paper as much as possible. We can create awareness among other fellow people, right? We can go for proper collection, transportation, and segregation of solid waste so that waste can be treated properly. Wherever treatment reuse is possible, that can be done, right? That's what. And then proper management of landfills. Let's try to go for sanitary landfills. Let's always try to cover landfills, right? These are various ways in which we can deal with garbage, deal with waste, etc. So in the mains examination, if such a question related to waste management, solid waste management are asked, you can simply put these points. These are very, very simple points from a scientific point of view given in your science NCERTs. So you can put them across. This is a very simple answer, right? You will get good amount of marks also. So with this, I would like to conclude our discussion on class 6 NCERT. In the next video, I will be talking about class 7 NCERT. It will be uploaded very soon at the same time. So this is all for today, and before going, I teach live on Unacademy Plus. So if you're interested, you can join Unacademy Plus. In case you're joining, you can use this code AKM Siva. This is a referral code. This will give you a 10% off. Alright. So I'll see you guys. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye bye.